This is Michelle Black, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Right on cue. There's an airplane flying overhead and a guy hammering in my next door neighbor's backyard. So this is great. This is a really interesting show. First off, everybody should get Michelle's book. It's called Sacrifice. Here it is right here. There's the link on the page. We're going to keep that up. This book is incredible. Thank you so much for writing this. You've done something incredible. Michelle Black is a Gold Star widow. Her husband was a Special Forces Green Beret long tabbing badass. His name was Bryan. He and the rest of the team that he was on, ODA 3212, were deployed to Africa. They were in Niger, and up along the Mali border, they were ambushed by I guess you would have to call them enemy forces, and four Americans lost their lives. Just about everybody there got shot in this thing, and it was a horrible travesty. And then the military, and the army specifically, in its infinite wisdom, started blaming the people that they sent with no backup, no CASEVAC plan. No, like they failed them in so many ways. It's shocking. And then they came back and said, well, those guys on the ground, they screwed up. They went rogue looking for a bad guy. And the truth is far from that. And Michelle went person by person, report by report, went through and told the whole story again in her book, Sacrifice. And so we're going to talk about that. Anytime we're going to have people come on who are talking about an area where I'm not an expert in or don't have enough knowledge, I always have to bring co-hosts on. And so we have Chris Schaefer, who is a former Green Beret. He ran ODA teams. He deployed to Africa. He knows this mission. He knows the people in these stories. And I thought, who better than Chris to give us some of the inside stuff? Because what we don't want to do is compromise our integrity as we tell this story, because Michelle's done such a great job. Let's get into it and talk about it. Michelle, what in the hell happened to your husband and their team? I mean, what on earth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. It was such a complicated story. It took me a long time to piece it together. I did several interviews, and basically the men were sent up into an area on a mission they weren't prepared for, severely under-equipped, and with not enough, obviously CASEVAC, medevac, whatever you would call it, ISR. They really had very little support, if any. And they just, were ambushed and were so far from help that by the time help got there, 4 members were killed, and including my husband. And they were being overrun by terrorists.
Let me let's cover a couple of things. CASEVAC, medevac. This means people who have helicopters in most cases who are going to come get you in case there is someone who gets injured. That sounds like badass people, and they are, but they also are very controlled in what they can and can't do. There's weather restrictions. There's if there's an active gunfight on the ground, they're very reluctant if they go at all to go. So these things that she's talking about also have layers of complexity in them. Doing a threat assessment. And as the intel guy here in the room, I would say this too, like if you've got intel, which is one of the reasons that spurred them to go forward to go after this guy. If you've got intel, it's degradable. It goes bad fast. And if you don't have intel and you don't always get perfect intel, but if you have intel that's not triangulated or corroborated or from a reliable source, you're, especially in an area where there is limited support. As an intel guy, I would be uncomfortable telling Chris as a team commander. I would say, listen, this is something. I don't know if it's the thing. Now, you can always decide to go and chase somebody because it's important to be active and everything else, but it's also important to use your intel wisely. I want to ask Chris, if you're going to send a team out on a mission and then that daisy chains into 2 different missions, at some point you start to run past the ability of that team to be prepared, to be provisioned, to be supported. How common is it to have a mission completed, and as your RT being returning to base, they're like, hey, we're going to have you back up another mission, and then that turns into, hey, we're going to have you lead this mission all by yourself. How often is something like that? I mean, crazy things happen in combat, but how often does that happen?
Well, Pete, my experience with Third Group was, and it's not uncommon for that to happen in any SF. team that's on the ground. Unfortunately, they think we're Superman. The 3 lightning bolts means you can do anything on your patch. We used to joke about that all the time. Hey, son, you got 3 lightning bolts on your patch. That means you can do anything. And the fact of the matter is that we are challenged and stretched all the time. Anaconda, in fact, was only supposed to be a 3-day trip. It wound up being 22 days. And that was just craziness. It just never ended. We didn't know when it was going to end. And we got back to the fire base 22 days later. And it was, so that's an extreme example of it, but it does happen. The problem that lies within that is that, logistics are difficult. Especially in an area like that, you have to always be prepared. Some of that is upon the team leadership to be able to say, "Hey, look, sir, we got RTB. We cannot pull this mission. There's just no way for us to do it." And that goes both ways. First of all, you shouldn't, in my opinion, the command should always understand what the logistic limitations are of that element, and you should make the call, or at least supply them, or back them up with somebody. And also on the team side of the house, you've got to be smart enough to say, hey, look, we got in an ambush near the Paki border one time, and our closest team was about 3 hours away, but that's all we had. We had air support, obviously. Africa is a completely different story. You can't compare the two. It's like comparing an orange to a basketball. It's so different, in every mission. The bottom line is it really depends on the guys, and it depends on the command. They've got to work together, but they have to be brutally honest with each other and say, hey, look, what are you doing? We can't do this. Look at our risk factor. And risk factors, you gotta continually evaluate that all the time. So
one of the things too, and we're actually going to let Michelle talk at some point, but I think we have to do some groundwork here. One of the things Michelle talks about quite a bit is they've got a bunch of old, beat up, worn out Hiluxes, which are mini trucks, 4-door mini trucks with a whole lot of overloading in them. And I know that those things are badass until you're like, these things are barely operational. They have no torque anymore. The motors are paper thin. You just like, are we going to be, and legitimately, one of the things you think about all the time, and I know, Chris, you're going to echo this, is can we self-recover? Yeah. And we know from reading Michelle's book that this was a thing where they were being recovered by their partner, the Niger army, and so you have vehicles that are compromised to the point where they're really not mission capable. Do you go out anyhow? Of course, but that's another aspect. And the other thing is when you look at these vehicles, and this is just a story from, again, Afghanistan, this happens all the time. A brigade came in. This is a combat brigade, right? These guys, and they drive Strikers, which are vehicles that go over anything. Well, they don't have them in this theater. They've got giant tanks that are like bomb proof, and they're like, we're going to push south to the border, we're going to encircle the Taliban, and we're going to defeat them, right? And it's like, well, hey, we've been here for a while. Here's first off, there's no road. It's snowing right now. Those vehicles don't like snow. They slide off. I predict that you'll get no more than 2 hours south of where you're at now, and you'll have to come back because you won't bring enough food, you won't bring enough water. You're going to be and it's just, you don't realize how rugged this terrain is before you do it. Talk about that. And then I want to bring Michelle in and talk about the provisioning that she saw from her investigation.
Yeah, logistically, it depends on, quite a few things. Can you cross load? What happens if X happens? Are you prepared to do this? And can the equipment you have even do it? It comes down to, Christ, we're going to walk 16 clicks out of here with all our gear. We're going to burn everything else out. Just literally set it on fire and just get the heck out of there. And those are scenarios that you prepare for, but they're so far down on the list, because your risk factors start to come down as you do your operations. Okay. You've got an intel, like you said, Pete. Intel says X, Y, and Z. Okay. These are the risk factors that we have. We conduct first mission, right? Those risk factors didn't really apply, and we don't think they're even valid anymore. So you take them off the list and you go down the list. And, unfortunately, we all get complacent, and that's a terrible thing. We've seen it many a day. you know, and just overestimating, oh, you know, these things will go down that road. No, they won't. You
They
know,
won't. No,
yeah, they won't. You'll get stuck. And I've been there, Pete. I know, you know, the snow, and you're like, what? It's like, yeah, dude, there's no road, first of all. And second of all, this thing weighs 16 tons. As soon as you put it in the mud, all you're gonna do is recovery ops. And I've been there for like 3 days.
Seriously.
You know?
You can't quit.
And then the truck falls off the cliff anyways, because you can't even get it. I mean, we were just like, well, now I guess that, you know, and what we did is we wound up blowing the truck up because, I mean, there's no way to get it out of the. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you can't even plan for that stuff.
We had the same thing. We had the same thing. We had a gigantic, massive vehicle in Afghanistan that got stuck, and so they had to use a gigantic other vehicle opposite. It got stuck, and then they had to leave one of them. They just had to leave it, you know, and then ultimately destroy it because, you know, these unforeseen things happen. So we know about this. We know about these complexities, right? And we know that we have to trust the commander on the ground to do the right thing. Let's bring Michelle back in. Michelle, when you hear us talk about how hard it is to operate in these austere environments with the old, worn out equipment, I mean, how does that, you've talked to these guys, you've heard the same stories. What are your thoughts on how the team was equipped in terms of the missions that was being thrown at it?
Well, what I start thinking about is the fact that, so we're discussing, or what you guys have just been discussing a lot, is Afghanistan. So it's the same complexities, but then you add on top of it the lack of assets in the country of, you know, especially Niger, those areas, they're sharing assets with other countries even. So we're talking about ISR that, you know, it's with them on their mission. And as the mission gets extended, it runs out of fuel and has to be sent back home. And there is nothing to replace it. Afghanistan, you might have, you know, something happens, you call in air support, and the air support can come and drop ordnance. That's not going to happen here. If the air support shows up, it's not going to show up in an hour. It's not going to show up in 2 hours. If it does show up, it might be the French, and they're not going to drop ordnance.
Yeah. Right.
So you're not talking the same thing.
Yeah. No, you're right. It is not the same thing. And we're talking about the complexities. So when you try to look at this and what these guys were up against in terms of equipment, it's almost impossible to be properly equipped, right? So they're going to have to make do with what they have. Right.
And so that's why when you're saying, you know, comparing an orange to a basketball, it's almost like comparing an orange, you know, like say Afghanistan's the size of an orange, and Africa, you know, Niger alone, you're looking at the assets. And so you pull up the map of the United States, and there might be an asset up in Washington State, and there's another asset over in Texas, and you've got them up in the middle of, you know, say Wisconsin, and they're going, we've got guys dying and we need somebody now, and we're sending in our Nigerian partner force trucks to save them. So we're talking, you know, a 10-hour, 12-hour drive to go save, you know. And so we're calling in Mexico to come in and, you know, pick the guys up for us. It's insane. So yeah, it's very complex. And so when we had a casualty, that's why it was so important to listen to the commander on the ground, because when he's saying, hey, we can't do this, he understands that if one of his guys falls, we're talking 6 hours until they can get medevaced out of there. And that's, you know, that's on a good day. That's with all, you know, all assets up and ready to go. And that happened. They managed to extract them in, gosh, I think 5 or 6 hours from the time the ambush started. But by then, I mean, people died in the first 45 minutes. So, you know, and other guys nearly died waiting for the assets to come and pick them up.
This is a good point. Part of the thing is they get rescued. However, only barely, only through luck. If the other side had just pushed forward, it would have destroyed the entire team. I mean, everybody would have died. So yes, we managed to pull these guys out, but only just barely. And honestly, a lot of luck involved. It sounds like from when you tell the story.
Yeah, there was a lot of luck involved, especially when you look at what happened with the communications on the ground. And, you know, and the, you know, the terrorists, when they heard the French come in, they assumed the French would be able to land. They assumed the French would be able to bomb them. They didn't know none of that would happen, that the French would run out of fuel eventually and leave. If they had known all of this, yeah, every team member would have died. And, you know, there's that scene where they come face to face with the terrorists, and there's this unexplainable reason why they just turn around. And you know the guys must have planned on coming back with everyone, and the French just happened to show up right in between that time period. So there was a lot of luck involved.
Will you expand on that part of the story? I know what you're talking about from reading the book, but it's remarkable. Like, this is, so they've been on the run. They've been trying to get away from this kill zone, and they're bedded down in tall grass hiding, and they can hear the search party, the terrorists, searching for them and getting closer and closer and closer. I mean, they're encroaching in on them, and they're afraid to breathe. They're afraid to talk. I mean, they have to be so silent. And then, you know, they hear him walking up. So what happens as these people that have already killed them, they've already been in a major firefight with them, and now they're walking up and they're on top of them. What happens next?
It's remarkable, actually. The two youngest men on the team are now having to command the team because everybody else is out of the fight. They're, like you said, laying in tall grass, and there's like a little divot that they're able to kind of bury themselves into in the dirt. And as they're sitting there just holding their breath, they hear people walk up on them on either side. And fortunately, the men are both facing out with their weapons ready to go. And it was like a slow motion. They step by step walk up on the guys, and the two men on this team make eye contact with the terrorists, and everybody just stopped. And the men on the team were waiting for the terrorists to raise their weapons. And so they literally had the red dots, you know, sitting on the terrorist's forehead. And they said, as soon as, you know, these guys lifted their weapons, we knew we'd have to shoot. But there were, you know, 100 to 200 guys just in the woods circling us. So we knew the minute we opened fire, everybody would hear it and they'd come over and we'd all be dead. But the terrorists who approached them knew that they would die also before they got their weapons raised. So they made the decision to leave and then go, I'm assuming, and alert their counterparts and then come back. But in the process, right after they turn and leave, the French jets fly over really low and everybody took off running. So, I mean, it was within minutes of the rest of the team losing their lives.
This is like out of a movie. I mean,
show of force, man. We used it a lot in a lot of different places, you know, and they understand that. So yeah, it does sound like right out of a movie, but that happens a lot. I mean, you hear that all the time during
being
stories.
isolated, being pushed out.
Yeah.
When you hear all the stuff that's happened here, I mean, yes, these kind of things happen, but how does this team get into this position anyhow? How do they get so far forward? And look, and the intel they're chasing, you and I know, we'll just talk candidly about intel here for a minute. You've got a signals intercept, and you don't know the quality of that as the commander. You know, it could be a ping off of a tower. It could be bullshit. You just don't know. And you also know how perishable that stuff is. So when you hear this and why they're out there on the flimsiest, honestly, not even good enough intel to push a team out. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, first of all, I mean, look, every time you go into a country, you've got several different initiatives that you're trying to accomplish. If you're training the indigenous forces, that's pretty much on the surface. Okay. Every guy on a team is there to collect intel. That's what we do. One person collects it all, kind of sifts through it and sends it up forward. There's always follow-on stuff and things that are going on, initiatives by the embassy and you know, even the host nation military. They have a lot of say in some of those things, and they can contribute significantly to it. But at the same time, you can't trust anybody. You know, I mean, you just can't trust anybody. I mean, and you know, because it's your butt on the line. And going out on flimsy stuff like that happens all the time. I mean, it just does. And you know, that's part of what sometimes you just get so complacent because it happens so often and you're like, you know, I don't feel that's, you know, even credible. And like you said, Pete, you get a ping and it's like, oh, I had a ping. Well, great. where was that from and who was it? And, is that phone even still there? I mean, none of that stuff stays for very long.
Yeah. Are you being baited to go out and go into an ambush with these pings? Like, are they doing counter intel on you?
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
And and I think that was one big issue with the intel they were using, that the guys on the team were finding, is since they had been in country, every time they would get a ping, they'd be sent down on the same intel, single source reporting, signals intelligence. And the captain had said before they sent them out again, just said, listen, like, we're doing this over and over and over. We're creating a bad rut. They're going to see what we're doing. This isn't good. And we're going after the same guy over and over based on this same intel. And he had actually had a discussion before they went out saying, why don't we let the intel build and let these guys get complacent and comfortable, and then we'll go in after them, rather than just actioning it every time. But instead, they went down on that same intel. And by then it was, I think the intel, which had a 2-hour window, they went in after that, off that intel, I think, 12 hours later. And of course, it was no good. And then they got more intel to chase it and more intel. And that just drove into the 2 follow-on missions, which led eventually to the ambush, which really, by that point, shouldn't be surprising.
No, I would agree with you, Michelle, about that, because look, I mean, if you're going to set somebody up, it's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks. I mean, so there was teams in Niger, obviously, because we've been there for years. I mean, in Mauritania, we had guys in there for 13 dang years before my team actually got there and finalized some things. So, as things change, I mean, they're always collecting on us. We're always collecting on them. So some of that stuff was probably even happening even before, your husband's team was even there. I promise you that. And they'd been collecting it for a long, long time. So the new guys get in there, they always take advantage of it, right, Pete? They always take advantage of the new guys there. They just do. I mean, they try to leverage friendships and all kinds of other stuff that happens on the ground. And you know how that works, new guy in town, man, I can get some free stuff, or I can make him do this thing, and because they just don't know.
The intel side of that too, I think it's important to talk about this, because if Chris is running the team and I'm there as an augmentee trying to help them gather intel, when I hear flimsy intel, I know what that means. This is my job. This is my profession. This is what I do. I'm going to say, Chris, I'll do whatever you want to do. You're the boss. But if you just this guy's not going anywhere. He's not going to stop operating in the area where he operates. We can absolutely walk our way into this and dramatically improve the ability to, and if it never gets any better, then we can always go do a hasty action, an action with that seems rash, in retrospect. We can always do that. But what we can't do is we can't always walk our way in, make the right connection, and then be introduced. I mean, I've been able to get us introduced to the bad guy where they're in the room and we deal with them face to face. And turns out a lot of times they aren't even that bad of a bad guy. We can chill them out by just giving them something. But if we can't do that, if we just go running after every time you get a cell tower ping or you get a piece of SIG, and again, I can't stress this enough, who's running who? I kept thinking about this in the book. Who is being run here? If you're a new team, I promise you're being run as the source. You are the sucker. And that's not because the team isn't good. It's just that's the competition. You've come into the middle of a game. It's the third quarter, right? And you think you're starting on quarter one, but you're not. You're so far behind, you're being run as a source.
Michelle, I got a question for you. How the team leader, I know a little bit about the story. We've got our channels to be able to kind of get some inside stuff on what happened, but I don't remember how seasoned that team leader was on that team, because as you tell me the story, it seems like he's trying to well, I guess that's a question. Was he trying to appease the command, do you feel, or do you think he was seasoned enough to be able to tell the command, hey, look, this
stop? Are we talking about the captain?
Yeah, about the captain
Yeah.
and the team
No,
leader.
he was pushing back. I spoke with all the guys on the team individually, and each of them were very frustrated, to the point of just, rage, because they were like, he did everything short of quitting, like pushing it to the point where he would probably lose his, be told to go back home, because he was like, we should not be out there. We do not want to run on this intelligence. This is terrible. The pushback was as far as he felt he could take it, and no one was listening. So in the end, he just goes, I tried everything I could. I've got video and pictures of him walking around having a conversation, and just, you can see the frustration and him just shaking his head and saying, no, we don't want to do this. And that was the same thing that I got told by every man on the team individually, was just the level of frustration that over and over, he argued, and all the men on the team, same thing. We do not want to do this. This is a stupid mission. We should not be out there. Captain Perezzini did everything he felt within his power that he could do, short of just, getting in trouble and being shipped back home over it. He did not think it was a good mission.
I want to jump in because I think it's important that we capture these moments. The other side of this is that, for the most part, and I would say this, and Chris, you tell me when I get out of bounds here, I'll let you talk next. But the higher level command sees this as being a relatively safe area. Yes, there's risk, there's threat, but it's like, what's really going to happen? And if Captain Perezzini, throws away his command over something, and literally nothing is happening, or nothing happens on that, when that mission happens, and there's nothing, it's like you quit over nothing, right? This is like a binary thing. You don't know this ambush is going to happen, and so you're trying to make the mission happen. So I understand Perezzini's position, and you have to find that level of where you can push and you have to not push anymore. But all the other times there hadn't been an ambush against Americans, right? And it's that complacency piece. Chris, how does that factor in with battalion ops, with the battalion commander? I mean, how there's and Michelle, you were saying in the book too, these guys knew that this was an extremely dangerous area because they're experiencing it in real time. The Nigerians are talking to them. There's a disconnect, I think, between the battalion and the company and the teams, and what the ground, and I'm big on ground truth, what the ground truth actually is. So I guess let me ask you, Michelle, first, what was the team's perception of just the general danger in that region, especially as you got closer to the border of Mali?
Well, one big thing they told me is that as you go past so Tilawa was the last town, and then you really don't see many huts after that. There are no roads. So they're going up for about 10 hours beyond that point, with no roads. And so there's that. It's also considered a free fire zone because it's the Wild West. The only people who are up in that region are terrorists, and they are on motorcycles, which go about 25 miles an hour. I mean, you can imagine you're driving your car through any desert in America versus a motorcycle, and there's no road. You're going to be all over the place. You're going maybe 5 miles an hour. The motorcycles, they're going to outpace you. So they know that if they get up there and anything goes wrong, even if their truck just gets stuck, I mean, they're really stuck, and they're stuck in enemy territory. And it's a free fire zone because anyone who's out on a motorcycle can be shot on the spot. And that's just, and if anybody is out at night, whether on a motorcycle or walking, they also can be shot on spot because that's how dangerous it is up there. So that's their perception. Is there's that factor, and there's the factor that there has been a ton of recent, ambushes, large ambushes, including the size of the one that they ended up being in that area. Granted, they were never on Americans, but I mean, I doubt that made them feel that much safer, So.
Yeah,
Chris.
well, Michelle, I know, man. I get what you're saying, and there was a disconnect. There had to be, Michelle. I mean, obviously, but you said something earlier about single source reporting, and that is just something you just cannot. I don't know why there was even action on single source reporting, because you and I both know, Pete, that's a no-no. You just don't do that. It has to be dual source, non-related reporting. And if you got one ping, that just doesn't make any sense. And the command should have known that. I don't care if you're in Africa or freaking Texas. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I
The
mean,
command does know that. They know better.
yeah, they know better. They have to know better, and they drop the ball on that. And I start asking the question, Michelle, did you? I mean, there's always these hidden like little agendas, that happen. Okay, people are people. They're going to be egotistical. They want, fame. They want power, whatever. They want to make the name for themselves or whatever. That always happens. You have to factor that in, just because it's just human nature. It's just you can't eradicate it. It's impossible. And so, I'm that's what I'm thinking, Pete. Where was the breakdown? Because those rules are in place. So what happened?
Well, as far as hidden agendas, I was told, so 6 months after the fact, I was told by the lieutenant colonel involved, and there's no proof of this. There's nothing beyond him stating it to me when he came to see me at home, was that, well, he felt that, what was it? There's a kidnapped victim and that they might be able to recover him if they went up there. Now, right. There's no way
they would have known about that. Yeah,
and there's no way they would have sent that team in for that kind of mission. So what I'm thinking is he pushed it ahead, hoping that they might get lucky and recover this guy, because he was known to be he was known to be in the company of this terrorist at one point, and they do believe that this terrorist was involved in his kidnapping at some point. They had no proof that he was still with them. Like, it was just something, and I don't know that he was using it as an excuse with me, but I have a feeling that as far as ulterior motives, that might have been what it was, is he was hoping to get lucky, and that would get him something. As far as,
tell you right now, I got to say something about this, and I'm going to let Chris go next. If Colonel Painter had said that in front of Chris and I, we would call bullshit in a second. We looked for Bo Bergdahl for every mission. Every mission, it was brief. Yeah. Bo Bergdahl could be out there. We always got to look for him. When I was in Iraq, we looked for Bo Bergdahl because we didn't know where he was. So every single mission, we were looking for a kidnapped guy, and he wasn't the only guy we were looking for all of them. Not actively, just if you see something, figure it out. We certainly wouldn't act on it. If they're somewhere, that's not even the team's mission. Okay, if you know for sure and you've got all this intel, yeah, we're going to flex this resource out. More likely, they're going to take it serious. They're not going to push a team that's poorly provisioned, doesn't even have all its guys. They're not going to push that team out to run that op. They're going to send, look, and God love everything the Green Berets do. They're fantastic. But that's not their job. That's Delta. No. They're going to go out there, and it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different operation. So he's full of shit. I'll say it right now. I'm going to let Chris talk for a second. Sorry, Chris, go.
Yeah, and so we recovered a couple of people out of Afghanistan a couple of times. And listen, there wasn't even a shot fired. I mean, what happened is you do it very systematically. Either the individual wants to be rescued or they don't. And that's the truth. If they have an opportunity to be able to leverage a certain activity like we did in Afghanistan, you do it in a very methodical way, and it takes time. And if you're going to go in hot, if it's going to be a direct action, people are going to get killed. That's just the bottom line. The guy you're trying to get is probably going to get shot. I'm just saying that's kind of the way it goes down. I mean, it's very rarely. It's not like the movies. No. And look, if that be the case, that whole team would have been briefed on that prior to even leaving the United States, because that would have been a big, big, big deal. And the embassy would have known about it. They probably would have had to brief the embassy on any type of operation that would have involved getting anybody. I don't care if he was a reporter from France. Yeah. I mean, that is a logistically like you said, Pete, it's Delta Force guys. And you know what? The ODA's got a couple of medics that can do some pretty good stuff, and they'll probably get attached to the Delta Force guys when they come in, and maybe a Camel guy. But look, that is, yeah. But I'm not saying, Michelle, that's not true. I mean, it's possible, but man, it just seems real flimsy.
Well, I
Well,
know that my husband's team, none of them had heard anything about it. And Team Arlet, the Helleborn unit who was flying in, they had this, I interviewed the commander and he laughed too. He said no, because we would have been the ones, at least we would have known, but we all would have known. He goes, but there was no mention of that.
This is how high level.
They wouldn't have sent in your husband's team. So
if this happens, I guarantee you the president has been briefed on it.
Yeah,
there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
It's going through the embassy. It's going through the embassy. The ambassador. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why when he came to my house, it took me a few minutes to realize he thinks I'm stupid. And I left early. I left him with my father-in-law because I thought I've been lied to enough. And maybe he thought he was getting lucky, but that wasn't their mission. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, he's full of shit. And just to continue to accentuate how full of shit he is, if there was some significant intel there, again, it would not be a single ping. It would be multiple things. They would direct a shitload of assets on it. And those guys wouldn't be going out there provisioned with broken down old vehicles, not enough of anything. It would be a completely different thing if there was an actual chance something was going on there. They would look, that's serious business. You take it seriously. They didn't act like it was serious business because it wasn't. It wasn't.
They would have at least had an ISR with enough fuel, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we're talking Africa here. So, I mean, the assets are not, first of all, it's semi-permissive in reality. Okay. Semi-permissive meaning that, you can operate pretty freely as Americans in that country without, too much of a risk factor. And ISR. Oh my God, man. I've been in Africa. I never had ISR. So those guys are lucky. We didn't have anything. I mean, we barely, I had a sat phone, and that's basically my commo because there was nothing else. I couldn't even use my regular radio because, I mean, the satellite was 10 degrees off the horizon. So, I mean, an anthill would get in the way of the doggone signal. I literally had to climb the tallest building in Mauritania to even make comms back to Fort Bragg. I mean, it was nuts, and that's just the reality of Africa. And you got crap vehicles. I mean, you just do. The best thing we had was we had some MP5s that, we were given by the embassy staff that had it there, and some bulletproof blankets that we put in the floorboards of our doggone Hiluxes because there was, IEDs were a thing. They always were. But ISR, man, I'm like, wow, they had ISR. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And this, this is the thing about the Green Berets and those 3 lightning bolts. I mean, Bryan Black's an incredible dude. All of those guys are incredible guys. They will get the mission done. And so when they spit the bit and say, not this mission, as a commander, Chris, what happens? What happens to the ops sergeant major and the ops warrant? How in the hell do they let this happen?
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of attention on those guys.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to ask Michelle. So what was the composition of the team? I mean, okay, so obviously there were some support cats that got killed from what I heard. But I mean, what was the composition of the team? Was it a full ODA? Did they have a full contingent, 12 guys? That doesn't usually happen, but
they didn't at that point. There'd been so much turnover in their team that at that point, they were still replacing guys. So that's why I say they were mostly there training, there to train the Nigerian counterparts. So they can do these things with a smaller team, but not as well. And that's why they shouldn't have really been out there at that point. And the commander should have known. And that's why the captain pushed back so much. It was, my husband was the medic. They had an intel guy. Fortunately, Bartels, who had worked as a ranger for years, and he was, I'd have to look up what he was, but he had all sorts of experience, so he could command the team. So there were a lot of very experienced guys on the team, but there were a couple new guys, some younger guys. So it wasn't a very seasoned team at that point, and it was smaller.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. So when you go do things like that, obviously, teams that are just recently put together, commanders usually put them in areas where they can kind of form cohesion and get their stuff together. And when they go on these missions, I mean, that's a J set, okay? What we would call a J set at the time. And each team had to compete and brief the command on how they would basically skin that cat, whatever that mission was. And then the commander would make the decision on which briefing was the best and which guys were most prepared, depending on the level of the mission, okay? And so you're competing with your fellow ODAs that are there to actually get a job, if you will. So there's a lot that goes into that thing, and there's it's just so sad that happened. I mean, it just really seems that it was just you don't know if they were trying to attack the host military guys and they just wound up upon some SF dudes and they just didn't know what they had. I mean, let's take it from that point. I mean, if you look at it from the enemy's perspective, what was their main objective? Was it to lure in these SF guys and kill a bunch of Americans? Because, once that happens, you draw a lot of attention to yourself. And that's not something most militaries would even want to do, or even get engaged with an SF team. Because, it's just going to be a fight. It's just really going to be a fight. I know the guys on the ground there fought like hell, and they probably ran dry on a lot of ammo. I mean,
yeah.
I can just imagine, because we're not going to take that line down, and we're going to sling lead. We're going to sling as much lead as we can, as fast as we can. That fast. As soon as the bullets start flying, you better watch out, because there's about 10 dudes that are going to throw 30 rounds of lead at you in about 30 seconds flat. And so, when we were in Africa, we never had a full contingent of our basic load either. So we'd go on missions all the time, and it'd be like, I got 2 magazines, I'm good. I'm more worried about water because it's flipping Africa, man. You're gonna pass out because you ain't got no water.
Yeah.
And we're probably not going to get attacked, and 30 rounds is probably more than I really need, and I don't want to carry all this crap anyways, because I got all these training supplies and materials, and I got these trucks, and I've got all these, I'm setting up a range today, and these guys, they got AKs, so I've got all this stuff for a range, and where am I going to put my stuff? Yeah, I got my bug out bag, but honestly, it's got like 90 rounds, and it's not even on me, because it's in my bag. I got a clip in my gun. Yeah, but if we get in a firefight, I got to get to my dang bag. And it's under, oh, by the way, 15 tons of other stuff, because we're going to the range. I got chow, I got water, I got targets, I got tape, it's just all kinds of, you're more worried about training the indige than you are getting ambushed. It's just,
are you wearing your kit? Are you wearing a plate carrier?
No, that thing's in the back of the truck, bro. You kidding me? I'm wearing a t-shirt and my pants, my cargo pants, whatever. I ain't worried about that crap. Yeah, ball cap, bro. Seriously, I've gotten in more firefights with a stinking ball cap going, damn, I wish I had my helmet.
My helmet was always attached to my body armor. And so I'd be like, maybe this is one of those times I should have had it on. And then the firefight's over before I can get my ball cap off my helmet on.
Yeah, I've been shooting at guys going, oh, damn it. It's all the way in the truck down there. I'm like, well.
And not to make light of the situation.
But no, not at all. But that is how they were going out most of the time. And, but also the enemy, this makeup with them as far as equipment and weapons has changed just rapidly over the last few years, because a lot of them have started to join, forces with ISIS and whatever over in Syria and, Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of those leaders over there have kind of, they're starting to all kind of connect. And there's a lot of area in Africa, from what I've read. And so they're kind of all trying to connect. And what you've had is, as they've started, those in Africa have started ambushing local military, they then collect all their weapons. And so now they've got, ZPUs and Dishkas, mortars, and I mean, just their weaponry is insane, grenade launchers, and they're getting money from, ISIS as a whole. And so they've got a lot more funding, and they're a lot more dangerous now than they used to be. And so on top of it, that's why when the team was turned around, so they went on their first mission and it was successful, and they were on their way home when they were turned around. And that's why Captain Perezzini pushed back so much. But it's also why he said, hey, our team, it's young, it's new, and we're really more in country to train. So we don't have the capabilities to, and the assets really to do what you want us to do. So he contacted his friend up in Arlet, and he wasn't, for him, it wasn't even hey, we want to fight over missions. It was, we'd rather not go on this because we're not equipped, and this is not a good mission for us. And this mission requires people who have better capabilities than we do. And so he contacted Team Arlet and said, hey, you guys get your birds spun up and come in, and you can create a better blocking position than we can. You can do more. You're working with an EFON, Special Forces of Nigerian, a Nigerian Special Forces unit that had been training for years with different American groups. So they really had a lot more capabilities than my husband's team. And so for Captain Perezzini and my husband's whole team, they were aware of what they couldn't do at that point. And they just, this isn't a good mission for us to be on. We'll go in as backup if we can even do anything to help, but we'll be there. So them going in as the lead team, that was a huge issue. That should have never happened. And they were aware of that. And yeah, as far as, but then, going down and traveling, wearing body armor, etc. I mean, like you said, you're worried about water more than anything in Africa. It comes right down to it. Yeah, you might run into some trouble, if you happen to cross some militants. But if you don't, your number one threat is vehicles crashing and dehydration. Yep. That's it. So you're not going to have your body armor on in, 130-degree weather in, nope. Dry Africa where you can't drink from their wells because it could kill you. So, or at least make you violently sick for the rest of your deployment. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Now, Michelle, how many team members did you interview? Did you interview all the remaining guys? And I mean,
interviewed, and then I interviewed a man who was back at the AOB. I interviewed one of the officers involved, and I interviewed the former South Africa commander.
And what is his name? The South Africa guy.
Oh, General Baldock.
Oh, Baldock. Of course. Of course.
He wasn't the commander anymore, though, right? He was. He had handed over.
He had just handed it over that summer. So he retired in June, and my husband, or July, and my husband arrived in August, and it was 5 weeks into their deployment when the ambush occurred.
What about that timing, Chris? I mean, you got flag officers swapping out command. You got an ODA command that's not there. The company commander was on maternity leave. You got a lot of folks changing over, not only in the team in terms of experience, but a lot of command turnover.
Yeah, I mean, we can sit here and armchair quarterback that decision there. I mean, it really depends on what was going on. It really, what are the teams doing? Where have they all been? How many guys are burnt out? I mean, that's the thing. Michelle, I don't know how long your husband was on rotation after rotation, but I mean, my experience was for 5 years straight, I was never home for 8 months out of every year. And when I was home, I was training anyways. So, I mean, I'd come home 2 weeks, be with the family, and then turn around and go on a month training event. And then I'd come back, have 2 weeks, and then go right back out the door to a combat zone, so it's difficult to say, yeah, there's going to be turnover, and that factors into it. But really, how much, we eat our own, unfortunately. We just keep going until the horse is just dead. And guys get burnt out. And, so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one, Pete.
Chris, another question I want to ask is they hit these guys pretty hard on not doing all of the pre-combat stuff they're supposed to do. Okay, fair enough. Is there enough time to do it? One of the things is like pre-combat drills, right? And apart from a briefing, which is the same briefing every goddamn time, you know, here are the most likely courses of action. Here is the most lethal course of action. And then you say all the things. What's our rule of engagement? And it's rote. It's not actual training. But they always love to talk about the, like sand tables. And if you're going to go on an op to do a presence patrol or something, in that zone, which is what these guys start out doing, are you actually ever... I know, look, I've been on 1,000 missions. I can tell you one time we ever did a sand table, and that's because the sergeant major was standing there watching us before we did it, right? Otherwise, we didn't brief and go, there is a building here. We will walk past that building and engage the ice cream man. That was never my reality. Maybe it's different with you guys when you're in Africa, but how often do you do these complex things where you're planning with the Niger army?
Never.
Never.
I mean, never. No, really. I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, but the thing is the other part of it is, how long were they in country, Michelle? I mean, so they got on the ground. You obviously got to go brief the embassy and sign all your stuff and meet the host nation and then set up your thing and do the little handshake and yada, yada, yada. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Okay, the plan changed. It always changes. You get on the ground and now they want, I don't know, night vision on their stupid guns or something, and they're mad at you because you didn't bring, the Ranger handbook in their language. I mean, I've literally been there. They're like, why did you bring this thing? You're like, oh, well, we didn't know we had to get it translated before we came here, and they're just angry at you. And you're just like, well, we didn't know, and so my question is, I mean, you get in the country, man, there's just a ton of things that, you've even got to do. It takes about 2 weeks just to sort things out. I mean, on day 2, you're doing training, but it takes you 2 weeks to kind of get your bearings because there's so much fodder that's coming. And that was my question, I guess, is, because we just don't have time. I mean, It's like, okay, there's a mission. Oh, well, we got to dive down this road again. Well, crap, guys. Okay. We think that there's, possible ambushes sites here and here and here. And, there hasn't been any IEDs or any, so we can eliminate that. Just watch your ass on, left, right limits. And, if we get hit, we got to go back to X. I mean, literally that's the way it is. And you're planning as you're going. But Michelle, my question is how long were those guys on the ground? I mean, how long were they in country? Because usually those JSET missions last maybe 45, 90 days max.
Yeah, they weren't in country long. They had just left. Bryan flew out from the States on August 28th, I want to say, or 26th. So, by the time he actually got into the part of Tuwalam, his actual station, I'm guessing it was probably September 10th at the earliest. Wow. So they were not there long. I mean, the ambush was the 4th. So, and as far as, they were all punished, like you said, for lack of not pre-deployment, that was somebody else, for pre-mission rehearsals. But they don't mention that they were all short suspense missions, right? Yeah. And the actual short suspense mission, how short they were, that went against all of their like regulations in country, right? So technically that was the fault of people higher up. That fell out of their matrix, their mission matrix, whatever. So they had to give a certain amount of warning, right? So everybody could get everything in order. So South Africa and all the commanders had to have a certain amount of warning before each mission in order to send it out. And so that they were way outside their own matrix for that. But nobody was punished at that level for that thing. Yet all these guys on the team were punished for not performing pre-mission rehearsals on short suspense missions, which is insane.
Yeah, that's wrong. I mean, it seems like there was a lot of complacency with the upper levels too. I mean, because look, if they would have thought it was going to be necessary, they wouldn't have pushed that team, and they just got. Right. I mean, everybody gets complacent, right? And so they're just like, those guys are in Africa. Nothing's going to happen there. Never does. They're not going to find anybody anyway. So, this mission really is, low risk level. And they just get in that weird cycle of, and it happens everywhere. And like I said, you're right. They would, the intel should have been dual source reporting, non-related. They should have gave them enough time to do their pre-planning missions. If that was going to be a mission in conjunction with what they were doing, which happens, but you can't send guys into the fray that's just sending guys into the blind.
Right.
We've got battle drills we can do, but really what is, and so what was their briefing, Michelle? Did you ever find out what their briefing was on that intel, Pete? Because Pete, you just don't say, oh, there's a ping.
Nope.
You got to have some stuff.
And if you do, the commander says, I'm going to break this rule. I am making a command decision to go outside of this threat matrix. Like, that's absolutely happened. Hey, you guys are on a short suspense. You don't have enough time to get things done. The command's like, I authorize you to go do this thing. Okay, now it's the boss, and it's the boss's responsibility. It doesn't stop becoming his responsibility. God, I'm going to get fired up and mad again. I want to make sure. Well, do you have a little bit of time? So I want to get into another aspect. Okay. So answer, Chris, can you repeat your question?
Okay. So they, what they were told was that they were to go up and exploit a campsite, which they felt, the ping was that's probably where the enemy campsite is. So we want you to go up and exploit the campsite and collect all information and intel you can. But then they were told, we also want you to create a blocking position so that you can prevent any terrorists, if you happen upon them, from crossing over into the Mali border. The problem is they're coming from the south, they're headed north in an 8-vehicle convoy that moves about 5 miles an hour through the night for 10 hours, right? And they're supposed to prevent these terrorists on motorcycles from crossing into the border of Mali. And that's when the captain went, no, that's not going to work. That's why we want to bring in Arlet. Arlet can create the northern blocking position, and then we'll the position to keep them from going over into the border, and we'll just come and be backup in case anything goes wrong. And Team Arlet would have had built-in CASEVAC. And as far as the men being punished for pre-mission rehearsals, the other thing I want to point out is that, while, like I said, South Africa, AFRICOM, they didn't follow their own approval matrix. The guys on the team, despite having limited time, they still made a little plan on the ground there, even after Arlet got canceled. They ran through it with their partner force as best they could, but they still only had, that was with 2 hours worth of sleep left. So they went over it with them for the last hour and then let the partners sleep for an hour while they did, they stood watch. So while the team took no sleep, the partner force got about an hour of sleep. And, so they did technically trade it for pre-mission rehearsals, but apparently that was not on the level that AFRICOM would let go of and say,
they're just trying to do. It's easy to blame the team. It's always easy to blame the team. Come on, and that happens all the time. And you know what? It really, SF guys don't listen well for the most part, and we do our own thing. And when we get on the ground, I remember the first time I went on, mission to Africa, and we did this big briefing, and I had to do all this stuff in French and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we got the mission, we got on the ground, my team sergeant's like, okay, guys, this is what we're really doing. It was completely different from what we briefed, and I loved him for that because, I got a lesson in, hey, look, this briefs well, but this is how we have to operate. And that's the bottom line. And it's easy to blame the team. It is really just easy to blame. But you know what it sounds like to me, Pete? It sounds to me like this thing wasn't intel. They were trying to verify some stuff. Blocking positions do nothing but stop and take information. They don't do anything. Okay. All they're doing is it's basically a traffic control point.
Yeah.
And you're stopping everybody coming in and coming out. And you're like, hey, let me see your phone. What you got? You got guns? Who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? That's all that is. And
the bad guys don't drive through those, by the way.
Yeah, no, because they know you're there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, yeah. And
Yeah,
I
but
want
it
to.
sounds like they were trying to. I mean, if there was anything underneath all that stuff, Michelle, I mean, maybe you can confirm this. I mean, it sounds like they were trying to validate some of the information that they had there, and those guys were basically sent on missions to go collect additional, you know, intel that supported their, you know, their initial finds.
I mean, that may very well be the case. Yeah, it may have just been, hey, is there a campsite there, and what else can you collect? You know.
I want to also talk about, because they go on this mission, the first mission, which they complete and are again on their way back to base. You know, RT being their mission complete, they're going home, and then they get curtailed to do this secondary mission, which ultimately Captain Perezzini, remember from the book, he's like, hey, let's not have us be the lead element. Let's get Arlett to do it. And Arlett agrees and says, yeah, that's great. And then Arlett runs into weather. And so a third mission is concocted where they're still going to go out. They have now, so now they've been out for, I mean, the mission starts on the 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, and they end up on the morning of the 4th arriving into the ambush site. But leading up to that, they had to, like you said, go 5 miles an hour. That sounds like they're purposely driving slow or whatever, but we have to understand how rough this terrain is. And then tell us what steps Captain Perezzini, the ODA commander, was taking to get these vehicles safely to where they had to go, and then how long all of that took and how far they covered.
Oh yeah, they gosh, he was out front. He had to actually get out of the vehicles because it's after dark and they know they're in enemy territory. So they all turn off their lights. And so the 8-vehicle convoy is now driving with no lights on, and the Americans are having to guide it using their night vision goggles. So they can't see anything because the grass is up over like way over the hoods of the vehicles. So, and it's, you know, rough. There are, I mean, wadis, there are all sorts of things. And these vehicles get stuck all the time. The guys tell me, yeah, we always have to get pulled out by the Nigerian counterparts. But they can't put the Nigerian counterparts in front because they don't know how to use the night vision goggles. So the captain gets out of the truck and he walks for 6 to 10 miles that night, directing the vehicles one at a time through the desert up towards the Mali border. And I think total they traveled about 25 miles.
And they're not going 5 miles an hour either. They're going way below that.
Yeah, I'd say 1 to 5 miles an hour. You know, it just depended. Yeah, once they got out beyond the last village, you know, the last road, it was basically, you know, goat trails, if that.
Right.
So, which really, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. I mean, man, and you're right. I mean, that makes it just rough in itself. I mean, you're not even worried about you're kind of worried about an ambush at that point, but you're so frustrated because your vehicles are stuck every 10 minutes, or you have to stop and go around a huge wadi, which you know you can't get through. And so now what should have took you 5 hours is now 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's
and
just
that's exactly it. They ran into a wadi, they had to go around, and by the time they got up to their, you know, the destination where they were supposed to stop and connect, they get there and it's 11 o'clock at night and they realize, you know, they're getting word that Arlett is not coming any longer and they're behind schedule, and now they've got to be up at the border before sunrise, and they're going, there's no way.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you know, man. So as you go throughout missions, and there is always criteria for you can no longer continue. Usually that's both medics dead or 50% of the team is gone or one aircraft crashes or, you know, whatever. You know, that's all set up along the parameters of how you're going to operate. And so, you know, man, that is such a tough deal. I mean, it's just a tough deal, and you've got a time hack. And if you don't make that time hack, you know, things just fall apart. You know, and God, I've been on so many missions where the time hack didn't happen right. And then, you know, 1/60th can't come in because the sun's coming up.
Yeah.
You know, so there you are. You're like, well, I guess we're sitting here. We just came into this place, and yeah, they know we're here now, and we got to spend all day here because they're not coming. And you're just, your pucker factor is like, you're just wondering when you're going to get ambushed. But yeah, that's rough. I mean, Pete and I have been there before, and that's just the nature of the beast, and it sucks. I mean, it really does. And there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, there just isn't. And those guys did the best they could. I promise you. Yeah. I mean,
it does make that entire situation harder, though, mentally, physically. And if you say a word, someone's like, "Suck it up, Ranger," and you're like, "Oh, that's right, I've got a Ranger tab on my arm." So you don't get to complain about it. But
no,
as a commander looking, you're like, "Why did we put these people in this position to where they had to do this?" And now they are so far removed from any goddamn help at all.
Well, yeah,
we all know, like, if they've got a basic load, if they got 3 times the basic load, it doesn't matter, and they don't know they're going to get into a firefight, but you don't know that they're not going to get into a firefight.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, we always try to put together packages at the embassy for, resupply, right? You always got package A, B, C, and you can make a call and say, hey, put this thing together. But most of the time, the team is the responsible entity for putting those packages together. And like, you don't have time, or there's no supplies there anyways, because what you came with is what you have.
Right.
So there's, I mean, there's many a times we went on a mission, and me as a commo guy when I was younger was like, hey, Sarge, what happens if XYZ, we don't have any resupply? What do we do? Oh, well, we'll just figure it. We'll have to E&E back.
Yeah.
E&E, really? Great. Escape and evasion for all those that wouldn't know what that is. Listening.
Another thing that happens in the firefight, right? So the firefight breaks out and the team starts reacting. And Michelle does a great point of bringing this up. And I want you to talk about this a little bit, Michelle. But the language barrier and the chaos of a firefight make it. Chris is already making faces. So I'm going to let Michelle talk.
I mean, oh my God. I mean,
yes.
So Niger speaks French. I'm pretty sure they're a French-speaking country, or they English?
Officially, they speak French.
Right.
But the problem is that would be in Niamey, the capital. Pretty much everywhere else, you're talking Zulu, Hausa, and about 5 to 20 other languages, depending on which part you're in. So they had a interpreter, obviously, who spoke all of them, but nobody else spoke all of them. My husband did speak Hausa. One of the, I think the Lieutenant Boubacar, who was, the commander of the Nigerian partner force, he spoke 3 or 4 languages. But with them, they had, I think, probably 10 different languages going on between all the different guys, because they came from all these different villages.
That's Africa. Yeah, it's just Africa.
Yeah, but the problem was that the minute the firefight broke out, their interpreter jumped from the vehicle with his radio and took off, and they never saw him again. Yeah.
A common man. I've seen that so many times. I've seen Terps just curl up and just, and here's the deal. I don't care what language is your secondary language. When you get in a firefight, trying to speak any other language that's not your first language is going to be a mess.
And to be heard, to explain correctly, it is hard to communicate in a firefight. It's all super short things like, I am moving, got you covered.
Yeah, more like, holy shit, those mofrakis are over there. Where are you going? Stop that. Come over here. No, sit down. Shoot that way. I mean, it's like 2 words, and you're not saying it in the native tongue.
So Michelle, so these guys get attacked. What's like the first thing that happens to confound the situation for the ODA and the Niger forces?
So what we all heard, which was every newspaper, every news report is the trucks are moving. We all saw the little video of the trucks moving, then they all stopped because Captain Perezzini wanted to stop and do a bold flanking maneuver. That's not what happened.
Of course.
What happened was the Nigerian partner forces were in the lead. They heard the fire break out, panicked, and they both tried to back towards the village. So one slams directly into the first American vehicle. The other one sees that happen, tries to go around and clips the American vehicle and stops right by the driver's side door. and there was a tree right there on the other side of the American vehicle, so they couldn't like turn out of the way, so it just stopped every vehicle in the lineup because no one could move. So that's why they stopped in the kill zone. They were stopped by the Nigerian partner force vehicles.
Yeah, and we knew that there was something crazy about that. I mean, the news media makes it to be out like, we're going to do some high speed crap, but it usually winds up being some crazy crap that you have no. I mean, I've been on a mission where trucks were supposed to come out after us and they came out like right in between us and turned the wrong way, and then we had to start running. I mean, and now the trucks are nothing more than bullet magnets, because guys that don't know how to shoot, they're just going to shoot at the biggest thing that's out there. And if you got a big green truck to shoot at, you're just going to shoot it up because you don't know what else to shoot at.
Right. But what's amazing is that was the official narrative by AFRICOM. And what was told, bullshit. And what it shows as, they had this graph that shows what, led to the deaths of Americans. And it said Captain Perezzini stopping his truck and doing a bold flanking maneuver. But an attenuated thing was an attenuating contributing factor. So, less or not at all, was that they were sent on the mission but it was Lieutenant Colonel Painter's decision to send them on the mission. And I thought, how is it that, the second and third con ops and pushing them ahead did not contribute to the loss of life, and yet this false narrative of him choosing to stop the vehicle and doing a bold flanking maneuver to assess the enemy situation is being blamed for costing American lives, when in reality, when he got over and saw more militants pouring in, he realized they were actually outflanking the American vehicles and were about to they were kind of in a bottleneck, and they were going to outrun them on the road and trap them there. So his flanking maneuver actually saved everybody who survived.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, listen, when you're in an ambush, your only chance of survival is to get the hell out of the kill zone. You're not doing anything. You can't do a flanking maneuver. I promise you. That is, that's what we're going to do. Okay. And that briefs well. Okay. And that's what they would have done. Okay. Yeah. No, the first thing is to get the hell out of the kill zone and then figure out what is going on and hope to God you don't get flanked. Yeah. Because if it's set up correctly, if the ambush is set up correctly, they're going to flank you. They probably already got a blocking position and a flanking position in place, because it's never linear.
And honestly, Mike's like, if I had known how many guys were there, I would have never, we would have just worked on getting the cars out of there. But he goes, we're getting a couple shots off. So we're thinking, okay, there's 2 to 5 guys. So we're going to go over, take them out, and then we're going to get back on the road, and untangle this mess. So that was his thought. When he got there, he realized there's a ton of guys pouring in. So if he hadn't gone over and seen that, they may have sat on the road longer, not realizing we've got a serious issue here, so yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy to armchair quarterback those guys, man. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know. I just know from my own experience in different things, and every single situation is completely different. It's always different.
I want to make sure we say this too, like, as you listen to the story and as you read the book, by the way, here it is right here. It's called Sacrifice, and you should get it. There's a link right there. It's in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast side. Every single time we talk about what Captain Perezzini should do next, he does something for someone who's forced into this situation, and he's acting like a Green Beret. He's not acting like someone who's gone rogue, a cowboy, someone trying to seek glory. He's not acting like that. He jumps out of his vehicle when they get stuck in what starts out to be a firefight, and he goes forward towards the enemy to try to figure out what to do, and tries to flank them. Okay, let's flank. Oh shit, we're being surrounded. Comes running back, sets up an exfil plan, and again, they try to put it on him like he boogie scoots out of there away from, Bryan and his truck, but that's not reality. Like you bound, and they look back and holy shit, nobody's there. And it was too late at that point anyhow. You don't get bound back into the bounding zone you bounded out from. Like And so
What?
to say all these
What?
things,
It's not basketball? What are you talking about?
and then
Well,
the
they got
next
the
thing,
ball now. Let's run the other way.
every time you look at the command decision higher, it is not a normal decision. It is a decision based upon covering your ass or going against policy or complacency, all these things. So the one thing I do know is the team is reacting to the next thing in front of them that they've been put in front of. And they continue to do that throughout the entire thing. The guys who didn't do that were, and again, I'm going to lean heavy on those battalion ops guys because they know better, and that battalion commander and that brigade commander because they own this. But those guys hardly ever have to pay. I mean, it's frustrating. I want to make sure we cover really quickly here that in the village they go to, the ISR reports no assets there, but really it's not an infrared asset, right? Or infrared drone. It's just got straight visual, right? And so they've got a lot of cover and concealment there. And there were people in that village. And then we know that guys who ride motorcycles are bad guys in this area. I'm setting you up, Michelle, to kind of lay the groundwork for what happens in this village and what ultimately leads to the attack, according to how you see this.
The village or the campsite? Because we had,
the campsite.
The campsite. So the campsite up near the Mali border where they were initially to go in and exploit and possibly detain any militants. So they were told there's, and we were told that there was only one tree up there. There was, nobody up there. Come to find out, the guys went in and there are trees everywhere. And what they do is they wrap it in this mountain laurel type. It's this brush that's full of, it's like stickers, and they use it as like a kind of like fencing up there. And what they do is they wrap the bottom of their trees in that and leave little open spots where they can go in, and then you'll never see them. And then they pop from tree to travel so they cannot be seen by the drones. And that's how they move in that region. And so the guys got up there and they saw this, and it just, shook them. So, because they realized there could be no guys up here, or there could be 100 guys all looking at us from under these trees. So they're going from tree to tree, and all of a sudden they hear an engine start up, and two guys are pushing a motorcycle out from one of the trees and take off north. So then they went, well, our drone is almost out of fuel, so we're going to have it follow that to make sure that we don't get doubled back on and attacked. And later on, the redacted report states that it did end up going up, meeting up with a whole group of militants on motorcycles, and then basically the captain had to choose which motorcycle to follow, and that was all he could do,
So was that an asset they controlled, or was that an asset that came from another unit?
It came from another unit. They were all sharing it. So he had to radio, and then they would send it to do different things. So yeah, he didn't have actual control of it, and it was running out of fuel, so it wouldn't have made it back to their base with them anyway. So they were about to lose control of it, and it was going to go back, refuel, and then be tasked to a different team.
See, and that right there would have been on the criteria as far as risk, as you're doing your risk assessment. You lose ISR, then, your risk level goes to here. We lose a truck, our risk level, those would elevate as you go up and you lose those assets to you. But I mean, like I said, it's easy to armchair quarterback somebody.
But see, then AFRICOM actually blamed him for sending his ISR following the terrorists and then up near the border. They told us, that he sent it off to watch the border, and that he should have, had it follow them back. And then I found out later, no, it was out of fuel, so it wouldn't have followed them back anyway. So
yeah, so what I heard about this also, Pete, is that the command said those guys went, they just kind of went cowboying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, we get that bad rap a lot. SF guys do. Oh, these cowboys are in here. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. And that's absolutely not the truth. I mean, we have levels of command. But Michelle, did you ever hear any of that? Because that's kind of, there's a little rumblings about that.
I heard a ton of that. And if anybody who knew my husband at all, there is no way First of all, Bryan was extremely formidable and extremely intelligent. And he was probably 6'2", 220, did MMA, skilled in hand-to-hand combat his whole life. That's when I met him. He was that way. That was before SF. So by now he also was, a national chess champion. He was just very methodical, very logical. So when you talk about a cowboy, anybody tried to act like a cowboy and he would have just had him by the throat. There's no way. So somebody said that to me and I just was like, that's a huge insult. The only way he would have done something cowboy-ish is if a militant grabbed one of the guys on his team and then he might have gone after them single-handedly and done something pretty ugly. But that's what it would have taken.
Did you hear that from any of the command or any of the other? I mean,
they wouldn't admit that, but you could see that. You could see that they're, because they were all, it showed up in the news.
Right.
And I think what happened is you have a bunch of leadership with absolutely zero moral courage who will not take responsibility for their choices and that they cost these lives. It's easier for them to lie to themselves and to others about their decisions. And then they went and probably leaked this to the press. And now the press is saying this. And now you start those rumors and everybody believes it because it's easy to believe. But anybody who knows Green Berets and has seen an operational team, they know that that's not true, especially when they're taking the majority of the blame. They probably have more moral courage than anybody at the highest levels who's blaming them. That's just... True.
So let me play devil's advocate just for a second. I'm gonna get in front of you, Pete, because I know what you're gonna do, buddy.
All right.
You play devil's advocate. So with the command, do we really know if they knew? I mean, did they honestly really have that much visibility and understanding of what was going on the ground, or did they just not know?
Well,
and so they just, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
maybe not all of the command, but there were a few key players who did know. So who were making the decisions, right? And those higher up allowed those people who made the decisions to go unpunished, but then also punish those lowest on the team.
Yeah, that's cowardice there, obviously.
Right.
Because they're not being truthful. They're not telling the truth.
Right. So if you've got the lieutenant colonel and the colonel, and they're very aware of what's happening, or they should be, but you've got, those higher up who don't know, they should at least be aware of the responsibility of the lieutenant colonel and the colonel, right? And then the lieutenant colonel and the colonel who made the decisions and were part of the VTCs or ordering these and overrode all the pushback to RTB from the team, they should hold the greatest responsibility. And they're the ones who validated all the training for these guys, all the pre-deployment training. But somebody else, the major, who wasn't in country, who was on, paternity leave. I had the wrong word. Yeah, I was going to say maternity, and I'm like, that's not right. Paternity leave. He gets punished for pre-deployment training, even though he was not there during pre-deployment training. And he was not the officer who could validate pre-deployment training. So the lieutenant colonel was not punished for pre-deployment training, which was his responsibility to validate. And he ordered the mission and pushed the mission ahead. So there are several points there where he should have been responsible or taken responsibility, and he didn't. And then he lies to me directly at my home about a kidnap victim. And then you add to the fact that I didn't even know his name until my brief 6 months after the fact. And the first time he came to give me condolences was after his name had been cleared.
Yeah, I've got to really, I think about who in the heck was the group commander. I mean, I guess you got an AFRICOM. So when you go into country, you have several different bosses, okay? One's a host military. That's who your customer is. That's who you're trying to please. Okay, that's the bottom line. Second, you got to deal with the embassy. Okay, they have say in what you do and whether or not you're even going to stay in the country or not. I mean, they can literally kick you out if they want to. They'll just revoke your doggone stay and you'll be gone. But you also have your command, and then you've got the battalion command, and then you've got the group command, plus AFRICOM. So you've got like 6 bosses at the time. And yes, it comes down to who's going to call the mission and who has the authority to call it off. And when there's confusion, nobody will take credit for making the decision. They won't call the ball, as we say. And so, I mean, did you look into that? I mean, that's such a complex thing that a lot of people don't understand about SF missions, that they've got that many different people that they're trying to please all at once. And so
I didn't, but what I found was that, so when the men got turned around and Arlett was going with them, there were VTCs that involved all those different levels. So that involved the 3rd Group Commander, and so the Colonel Moses and Lieutenant Colonel Painter, and they were all involved, and all the approvals went all the way up. So where the breakdown seemed to happen was when Team Arlett was turned around, and the team said, "Hey, we'd like to return to base," and it's late at night, and what it looks like from everything I got from AFRICOM and other people I've talked to is that they reworked the CONOP, but I don't know that it got all the proper approvals all the way up. It was just kind of pushed through and the team was told to go. So Lieutenant Colonel Painter had it reworked. They did, was it the 5 W's or whatever, but missing from that was the 2nd risk assessment. So they didn't do another risk assessment before sending them up. And it says that was then forwarded to Colonel Moses's command, but it doesn't look like he got that until the next morning. And same with the SOC Africa commander, and he didn't get notification of that until the next morning. So there was a breakdown there.
Yeah, and it's funny because I went to dive school with Colonel Moses. Great guy. I know him personally, and he's, talk about follow the damn rules. I'm sure, he was pretty upset. Did you get to even talk to him, Michelle?
I did. I didn't talk to him for the book. I spoke with him. He came the first, I want to say the first week to my house. And then I spoke with him and his wife several times. So, and I think that's been the hardest thing writing this, is because I've liked everybody so much. And it's like, I don't want to say that anybody has responsibility. And honestly, from the beginning, I didn't want anybody punished. I just felt like these things happen. I just want them to be honest with me. Yeah. And I think it was the lack of honesty from the beginning. And it became clear that it was to protect careers. And that's when I just went, then why do I need to keep feeling bad? Because I do like everybody and I do think they're all good people, but I don't know at what point I demand that they be accountable when they've allowed people far down the chain to be held accountable that they know should not have been. That's just,
I know the answer to this. This is easy. They're special forces people. The accountability starts the second they open their mouth, the second this happens. I guarantee you, anybody who's in command at the higher levels who didn't hear about the email ahead of time because of being in bed, the moment those guys are in contact, every commander in the chain is woken up, because that's our wake-up criteria. We all do things. When we work in this community, it's hard. As a collector, someone who's not on a team, and I go out and support a special forces team, you better believe I'm going to go through what we call a murder board. Now, I'm good at what I do. I know my collection things. So when they throw things at me, it's short, because they understand that I know what I'm doing. If you fuck up, you get told you fucked up. You have to correct this. You did this wrong. You stand up and you take accountability for it, because there's no room for that. We don't have, it's too hard to do. It's too hard to walk the whole night to get a patrol at 1 mile an hour going through wadis and brush. It's too hard to know that you don't have anybody above you who's going to support you. And it makes me mad, because there's so much BS in this story, not from you, but from the machine, and here's what really capped it for me at the end. we're already bad at awards, but to downgrade Perezzini's award to what was an Archon with the V device? Fuck you.
I don't even think it was a V device. It was a C for combat.
Yeah. I mean, look, when the David Johnson and when Dustin and Jeremiah Johnson die together, and one of them turns to protect this stuff's on video, turns to protect the other one. That's Medal of Honor grade combat stuff. Knowing he's going to die, turns and fights with what he's got left, and this is not Silver Star territory. It's an insult to all of these people. I mean, who cares about the awards ultimately, but this more indicative of how the lack of faith, the lack of seriousness they took this. And they to do that. I mean, to be given an award, I don't know if you know this, Chris, but Captain Perezzini got it's Arcom or AAM, one of the two, in a hallway from a warrant officer. Hey, by the way, here's your award.
Yeah, it was months afterward. They forgot to give it to him. They were just like, we've had this sitting on my desk.
Is a command failure
and
of the worst kind.
And here's what would have happened. Here's the truth of that matter. If they would have found a bad guy or they would have rescued somebody and it would have been this big ass success, I guarantee you it would have been, oh my God, they would have had a damn battalion group formation and those guys would have been, but because it went south and because it got all fucked up and people died, and they knew they had a part in that. They absolutely had a part in it. There was breakdown in communication. It sounds like that's not uncommon. It happens. I get it. I totally get it. But the criteria to go out on a mission like that with just a single that does not even make sense to me. It doesn't really make sense. And it sounds, the more I listen to you, Michelle, and I haven't read your book, and I think I'm going to get it. I mean, it's just hard for me to read a lot of those things because I was there. I did those type of things, and so I get kind of critical, but I haven't even watched any of the war movies from Afghanistan because I was there, but I can watch World War II movies. This is no big deal. But it really sounds like they wanted more intel and they were using these guys to do stuff that, first of all, wasn't their mission. I don't believe, right? I mean, everybody says, okay,
that Foxtrot asset wasn't with them, right? Isn't that right? Wasn't their intel collector back? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, God. He was
they
back
didn't
at
even
base.
have their Fox?
No, he was back at base.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay, that happens. Did they have a warrant with them at least?
I don't think so. No.
No warrant officer either, because they're usually the level 3 guy.
Yeah. No.
So no warrant. Okay, so you got a Zulu. Was he Fox trained? Do you know if he had an identifier for intel?
I don't. No, their intel guy had just gone and started working out at the AOB. So he was actually one of the guys I interviewed. And
because that doesn't even make sense. I mean, even if they were going to go collect intel, they would have had to have a guy at least knowledgeable on how to collect intel, and put it in a communique in an intelligent manner that actually got to where the hell it needed to go.
Okay.
Unless they were just going to collect stuff and come back and tell the Fox, hey, this is what we got. Cack up the message. You need to send it out. But that doesn't make sense either. I mean, it sounds like they were sent on some type of direct action mission when it should have been an intel mission.
Well, and they did have a vehicle sent to them from Niamey that was some sort of specialty intel collecting team. So that's probably what that was.
Like a SIGINT, some type of SIGINT.
I'm not entirely sure. I was told it's basically secret.
Suffice to say, it doesn't make a whole lot of damn sense.
No, it doesn't.
They approached it. Yeah. Well, listen, we've been going at this for an hour and a half, and I covered the big things I wanted to cover, other than the fact to say that each of these 4 men and everybody on that ODA deserve, our gratitude and our respect, and obviously our condolences to you and all the Gold Star families. What a horrible thing. And I'm also proud that it took us 93 minutes before I said the words Trump. Because that whole thing is a whole different narrative stealing nonsense too, and I don't even want to get into it, but there's so much into it, and the book is fantastic. I hope they make this thing into a movie. I've already talked to a couple of friends about this. It's called Sacrifice. It's right here. You can get it on Amazon. Use the link that we have. That helps us out. Michelle's book is called Sacrifice. Michelle Black, Sacrifice. Her husband was Bryan Black. And just, I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you standing up and saying this is not right and holding us accountable, because every time this happens, the commanders learn their lesson a little bit. They might try it again, but they know there's someone out there like you, Michelle, that's going to say, I'll be goddamned if I'm going to be damned by this. Line it up, and those guys know. You look at them right in the eye and you call them on their accountability. And even if they don't admit to it personally, deep down inside, they know they're wrong, and they'll have to carry that, because those guys died in part because of the system failing them, and that means the command failed them, So, yeah. Chris, anything in closing?
Yeah. Hey, Michelle, good work I'm glad you interviewed the guys. I'm glad you're intelligent enough to see bullshit when you see it. Because, there's a lot of books out there that they just take whatever they're given and they make a big old mound of crap out of it. But, and just from talking to you, thank you for putting this together. I mean, those are my brethren. I was in, 3rd Battalion for a long time. And so, I know a lot of those guys out of 2nd Battalion, and I've even got their sweats and everything else with their logo on it. Always love their logo, do bad things to bad people. So, and that makes so much sense, it really does. In fact, that's what we were told to do when we got into Afghanistan. But so anyways, thank you so very much for that. I'll look forward to reading your book too.
Michelle, anything in closing?
Just thank you for having me on and reading the book, obviously, and having a great discussion prepared for me. I love it when I get challenged a little and I get to actually discuss it on a format where you guys understand the operations and you understand what something should look like versus what it did look like. And to ask the right questions, and we can have a really interesting discussion, and that we're not discussing, these guys shouldn't be in Africa or something that's just such a waste of my time. This was all Trump. Let's talk about the real issue here. People being held accountable so these things don't happen again. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, our pleasure. Stand by, everybody. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.